ISKCON founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur ki jai. Prem se kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivashadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda ki jai. Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopinath Shyam Kund Radha Kund Giri Govardhan ki jai. Vrindavan Dham ki jai. Navadip Mayapur Dham ki jai. Ganga Mai ki jai. Jamuna Mai ki jai. Tulsi Devi ki jai. Bhakti Devi ki jai. Gaur Premanande. All glories to the assembled devotees.
Hare Krishna.
All glories to the assembled devotees.
Hare Krishna.
All glories to the assembled devotees.
Hare Krishna.
All glory to Sri Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga. Hari Hari Bol.
Hare Bol.
Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Shami Iti Namane. Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirbishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatadine. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 We're reading, discussing, and studying the Sri Caitanya Charitamrita. Here we are at the branches of the Caitanya tree, and here we are at text number 21.
বৃক্ষের উপরে শাখা হইল দুই স্কন্দ, এক অদ্বৈত নাম আর নিত্যানন্দ।
At the top of the tree, the trunk branched into two. One trunk was named Sri Advaita Prabhu, and the other Sri Nityananda Prabhu.
সেই দুই স্কন্দে বহু শাখা উপজিল, তার উপশাখাগণে জগৎ ছাইল।
From these two trunks grew many branches and sub-branches that covered the entire world.
বড় শাখা উপশাখা তার উপশাখা, যত উপজিল তার কে করিবে লেখা।
These branches and sub-branches and their sub-branches became so numerous that no one can actually write about them.
শিষ্য প্রশিষ্য আর উপশিষ্যগণ জগৎ ব্যাপিল তার নাহিক গণন।
Thus the disciples and the grand disciples and their admirers spread throughout the entire world, and it is not possible to enumerate them all.
উড়ুম্বর বৃক্ষ যেন ফলে সর্ব অঙ্গে, এই মতো ভক্তি বৃক্ষে সর্বত্র ফল লাগে।
As a big fig tree bears fruits all over its body, each part of the tree of devotional service bore fruit. Purport. This tree of devotional service is not of this material world. It grows in the spiritual world, where there is no distinction between one part of the body and another. It is something like a tree of sugar For whichever part of such a tree one tastes, it is always sweet. The tree of bhakti has varieties of branches, leaves, and fruits, but they are all meant for the service of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. There are 9 different processes of devotional service: Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu, Smaranam, Padasevanam, Archanam, Bandhanam, Dasyam, Sakyam, Atmanivedanam. But all of them are meant only for the service of the Supreme Lord. Therefore, whether one hears, chants, remembers, or worships, his activities yield the same result. Which one of these processes will be most suitable for a particular devotee depends upon his taste. Om Agyana Timirandhasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Mano Bhishtang Stapitam Jena Bhutale Swayam Rupagata Vahyam Dadati Shapandantikam. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivashadi Gaur Bhaktivinoda. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Thank you, each one of you, for attending today. And at the beginning, I'd like to just mention one thing. Yesterday, I got a nice an email from Mother Shyama Gauri. And she asked me, she said, in the 3rd canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, there's a discussion when Vidura is seeking instruction, and 2 capable persons are present. Uddhava, who's the cousin of Lord Krishna, and Maitreya Rishi. So, who spoke? Do you know? Who spoke to and instructed Vidur?
Maitreya Rishi?
Yes, yes. Even though it could be argued that Uddhava was a closer associate of Lord Krishna, who's the source of all transcendental knowledge, still, because Maitreya Muni was senior and still could have that knowledge, he should speak first. And that's something called the Maryada Vyatikrama. I think it's called Maryada Vyatikrama, that the senior should speak, or should be at least offered to speak. So she said, well, I'm sorry to pick on her today, but she said, but I'm a junior person here, and when if I'm asked to give class, there are many people senior to me. So what should I do? What is the best thing to do? So isn't it, if I speak, isn't it the offense of Maryada Vyatikrama? Right? Good question, right?
Yes.
So what is the answer to that?
You take permission and then speak?
Oh, good, yes. You asking permission for this from the senior or seniors, ladies, men, to speak, and then if they give permission, then you go speak. In Srila Prabhupada's time, it wasn't unusual that at certain times, when he was present, he would ask his disciples to speak, even though he was sitting on the Vyasasana. And so, but with his permission, sure, certainly they would speak. They wouldn't say, oh no, I can't speak. No, well, they spoke permission, and Similarly, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he was speaking, he had a discussion with Ramananda Roy, and even though he's the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Ramananda Roy was there. He wanted Ramananda Roy to speak. He said, you're God. What can I do? So, but Lord Chaitanya said, no. So with his permission, Ramananda Roy spoke. Lord Chaitanya's permission, like that. So that's what I did answer in that way. So then I was thinking also, what about me? When I speak, should we always offer our respectful obeisances? That's why we offer our respectful obeisances to the disciplic succession, and particularly Srila Prabhupada, our spiritual master. But also, there might be some senior devotees present, and I should also ask their permission to speak. So, for example, I see that Kaivalya Prabhu is there. So if he would be kind enough to give his permission, I will speak something. I should, he is senior to me in his, that physical body. And it's not just a ritual that we do that, but actually getting the permission. So I have to get the permission. Yeah, he just unmuted. Okay, please.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Thank you, Prabhu. You have so much knowledge, and you read so much, so I'm a grahastha, and I don't have that much.
I just want your
definitely
permission.
you thank you, Prabhu. Definitely you have it.
Okay, good. Thanks. So I thought that was important. Yeah, not just to say go through the motions, but actually get the permission, because to avoid that. So I've been lax in that, but I wanted to introduce that here. So then, in thinking of this tree of devotional service, in the introduction of this chapter, Bhaktivinoda Thakur made certain points. He was talking about how the tree, it first grew, remember where? In the, where's that?
The seed was sown in Navadvip.
Yes. And then, but the tree was then taken from Navadvip to Puri, and then from Puri, it went to also Vrindavan. So obviously, this tree, and we'll read this later, not being an ordinary tree, it can move around. On one hand, the verses say that the tree spreads its leaves and its branches all throughout the world, but also, in addition to that, it's a movable tree, so it's not an ordinary tree of this material world. And because it's completely spiritual, every part of the tree can function as any other part. Ordinarily, trees are eating from the roots, but the tree, because it's a completely spiritual, can eat. That's why we have this example given in Srimad Bhagavatam. If you want to nourish the tree, you have to water the root of the tree. Then all the leaves and branches, they can be satisfied. But this spiritual tree, it can be watered on the leaves and branches, and it also can produce fruit from the roots, because it's a spiritual tree. Lord Brahma mentioned that in his prayers. Angani yasya sakalendriya vittimanti, pashyanti panti kalayanti chiram jaganti, ananda chinmaya sarujvala vigrahasya govindam adi purusham tamaham bhajami. Purusham. All the different parts of his transcendental body work can use have the functions of every other. So he can see with his ears, taste with his touch, like that. And it's actually also the quality of the spirit soul. The spirit soul has, in its pure state, has that ability. And it's sometimes mildly or slightly reflected in the material world. For example, sometimes persons lose their sense of sight. So in order to read, what do?
Touch.
Yeah, they use Braille, right? So they're reading through their fingers. We're usually ordinarily reading through your eyes. And it's actually true that people can adjust slightly, not fully as in the spiritual world, with one sense and another in the material sense, but it's fully available there in the spiritual world. And so I was thinking, well, on one sense, the tree of devotional service is moving from Navadvip to Puri to Vrindavan. And did Srila Prabhupada also take this tree with him on the Jaladuta to the United States when he came in 1965? It's not said here, but I was just wondering that. You know, sometimes the trees for their fruits are appreciated in different parts of the world. You know, not native, but taken from one native place to another for their good qualities of their nectarian juices, etc. For example, there was a famous ship called the Bounty. Have you ever heard of the Bounty? There was a mutiny on the Bounty. Never heard that? Okay. It's British history. Anyway, this is in the late 1700s. But it was going from England to Tahiti, because Tahiti had lots of breadfruit. And they wanted to, the idea was to take the breadfruit trees and bring them from Tahiti, which is in the middle of the Pacific, to the West Indies, where England had Great Britain had several colonies, and transplant it there to grow for the feeding of the slaves. So anyway, it wasn't successful the first time because of a mutiny, but the second time they made it to Jamaica and planted Jamaica, I think it was. They planted the tree and grew breadfruit. But you know what happened? It wasn't successful because the people eating the fruit didn't like it. It wasn't tasty to them. They didn't like it. So it's kind of a failure. But this fruit, the fruit of devotional service, of Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu Smaranam, we'll see that this is the most tasty nectar. Everyone can enjoy it. Young, old, men, women from all countries of the world. So this is something special beyond the breadfruit that we find in Tahiti. Comments or questions on this verse? Okay, next.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Oh, Hare Krishna. This is Prananath, I think, Prabhu.
Yes, Prabhuji. Please accept the humble obeisances of Krishna.
Yes,
I have a question, Prabhu. In the purport last line, it says, which one of these processes will be most suitable for a particular devotee depends upon his taste. At the same time, we also hear that the Yuga Dharma is the Harinama Sankirtanam.
Yes. So it's a fact that without the Harinam Sankirtan, or the regular chanting of the holy names, none of the other processes will work. Jiva Goswami said, for that reason, any activity should be preceded and followed by kirtan, chanting of the holy names. But there are other 24 hours of the day, so one person may be more inclined to do service in a particular way. It might be in deity worship, maybe in cooking for the deities, or preaching, or in so many other ways. But you're right that the basic has to be there, for sure. I see Brajesh Govinda Prabhu has his hand up. Last time we couldn't hear him properly.
Yeah, Prabhuji, the spiritual tree you are talking about, is it like similar to the Kalpa Vriksha?
Similar, yes.
Okay, thank you, Prabhu. Yeah, just question this. Thank you, Prabhu.
It may not be the exact same species, but it's similar.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. 26.
মূল স্কন্ধের শাখা আর উপশাখা গণে লাগিলা যে প্রেম ফল অমৃতকে জিনে.
Since Sri Krishna Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was the original trunk, the taste of the fruits that grew on the branches and sub-branches surpassed the taste of nectar.
পাকিল যে প্রেম ফল অমৃত মধুর বিলায় চৈতন্যমালি নাহি লয় মূল.
The fruits ripened and became sweet and nectarian. The gardener, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, distributed them without asking any price.
ত্রিজগতে যত আছে ধন রত্নমণি এক ফলের মূল্য করি তাহা নাহি গণি.
All of the wealth in the three worlds cannot equal the value of one such nectarian fruit of devotional service.
মাগে বা না মাগে কেহ পাত্র বা অপাত্র ইহার বিচার নাহি জানে দেয় মাত্র.
Not considering who asked for it and who did not, nor who was fit and who unfit to receive it, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu distributed the fruit of devotional service. Purport. This is the sum and substance of Lord Chaitanya's Sankirtan movement. There is no distinction made between those who are fit and those who are not fit to hear or take part in the Sankirtan movement. It should therefore be preached without discrimination. The only purpose of the preachers of the Sankirtan movement must be to go on preaching without restriction. That is the way in which Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu introduced this Sankirtan movement to the world. So this point is a very salient point for us to be reminded of in how we approach distributing Krishna consciousness. We're following in the footsteps of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu himself and his followers, his disciples, and his Srila Prabhupada. So we, in following their footsteps, we should try to go according to the principles that they follow. And if we do so, then there's good possibility of success. In fact, Lord Krishna, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu assures the success. So sometimes within our minds, I know in my mind, sometimes it happens that we think, oh, this person they're from this particular background and they'll be interested in Krishna consciousness, but not that person there. You know, it happens. And so we're not open or convinced enough about the philosophy of Krishna consciousness and the potency of Krishna consciousness to offer it to everyone. The fact is that we really don't know. We're not at the stage where we can understand or know who is a proper recipient, who might be interested. So Lord Chaitanya's movement was offer this Krishna consciousness in the form of chanting the holy names, distributing Krishna Prasadam, distributing transcendental literature, approach everybody. Srila Prabhupada in India, when they were started programs of prasadam distribution, he wanted prasadam distributed within 5 miles, everybody within 5 miles of the temple in Mayapur should not go hungry. 5 miles. And some people say, well, that was only in Mayapur, not another. But actually, he said later, it's for every temple. Wow. And then the question was, well, is that prasadam simply for the poor people? And Prabhupada said, no, everybody should have the opportunity. Poor, rich, in between, Muslims, Hindus, Christians, atheists, everybody should get the opportunity to take prasadam. So this is the same principle given here. In Africa, devotees started preaching in Africa, and they were preaching primarily to the Hindus in Kenya. And there are many, mostly a lot of Gujaratis were there. And when Srila Prabhupada came there first in 1971, he said, why preach only to the Hindus? Why preach only to the Hindus? There's Africans here. So he pressed on them, you don't preach to the Hindus, but in addition, they should preach to the local people. So they rented a hall in the middle of the middle of town and started the kirtan. They opened the doors to the hall and the kirtan. So many people came and joined the kirtan and were dancing and chanting in great happiness in the Sankirtan movement of Lord Chaitanya, even though they were not familiar with the chanting of the holy names, and they weren't from a Hindu or an Indian religious background. It's the proof is it's proof there that Krishna consciousness isn't something that's from a particular country or nationality or religion. Caitanya, it's it's quoted in Caitanya Caritamrita. Nitya Siddha Krishna Prema or Krishna Bhakti Sadhya Kabunoi Shravanadi Shuddha Chitte Kareye Uday. The Krishna consciousness is the natural, dormant, spiritual consciousness there within every living entity in the universe, even animals and trees, to speak of all different kinds of human beings. And the process of awakening that Krishna consciousness is simple. Shravanadi Chuddha Chitte, hearing and chanting will awaken that consciousness of Krishna, regular hearing and chanting, as you're doing. I've given the example, I don't know if you've heard this example. I thought it was kind of goes along with what Srila Prabhupada says. There's a person, a scientist named Alfred Loomis, who lived in Tuxedo, New York. And he was an inventor of various things. He liked to he had a hand in developing radar during the Second World War, or developments of radar. But he also had an interest in brain waves. If you've ever gone for sometimes they can test your brain waves. There's different levels of brain waves. So he wanted to know, when someone is sleeping, what level of what kind of consciousness or awareness is still there with a person. So of course, usually scientists, they start off by experimenting with their children, their own children. So he had a teenage son who was a boat enthusiast, and they were a little bit well-to-do, so he had a very nice boat that was the favorite of the son. So he had his son come into the laboratory and had him go to sleep. And he had electrodes fixed on his head so he could measure when the boy was in the deepest stage of sleep. There's different stages. The deepest stage of sleep. And just at that time, as the boy was in the deepest stage of sleep, over the loudspeaker in the laboratory, he said, your boat is on fire. Guess what happened?
He woke up.
Immediately he got up and wanted to, So, so even the deepest level of sleepiness is the consciousness can be awoken by this hearing and chanting. So sometimes I know in the beginning of Krishna consciousness, it was true, at least in the United States, if most of the devotees in the West were from Western background. So if an Indian person came to the temple, person from an Indian background, we would think, they're no use. No use preaching to those people because they're not going to join the temple. They got their, they have other things to do. I'm telling you this. That's what I thought. But it was interesting for me to find out, that the first time Srila Prabhupada came to Henry Street, where I was a devotee, joined the temple, New York, Henry Street, Brooklyn in 1971. So Prabhupada gave class. He arrived during the week and he gave class in the evening time. And the room was packed with devotees, mostly all Westerners. But there was one gentleman who came. He heard that the guru of the Hare Krishna movement was coming. So his name was Mr. Desai. So he came and he couldn't fit inside the temple room, but he stood outside the door. So as Srila Prabhupada was leaving, he said, come with me. He told Mr. Desai, come with me. And so he brought him into his quarters and he preached to him for, 10 minutes. 10 minutes. We didn't pay much attention to Mr. Desai, but Srila Prabhupada did. So Srila Prabhupada was preaching to everybody. And now sometimes people think, well, the American people are not going to take the Krishna consciousness. So we'll focus on, we'll go to the Indian spots. That's it. But no, everybody, by their nature, the spiritual nature is attracted to Krishna, and we should learn how to present it purely so that attraction can be developed. Comments, questions? And I'm sure that we committed some offenses to people in different ways in those days, ignoring people. But I never, so Srila Prabhupada called Mr. Desai into his room. I never got called into Srila Prabhupada's room. So this is amazing that how Srila Prabhupada, he preached in such a way. So that Mr. Desai, by the way, is an initiated devotee who lives in New Jersey. So he was certainly influenced by that for sure. Many examples like that.
Yeah, to your comment, thank you for observing. I think it's natural. People find it's natural that they connect with their own people very easily. But I see the Western devotees, they think that Indians already know Krishna consciousness. Somehow they, at this time, it's not like that they will not accept now, as far as my experience. They think, they're from India. They must be already well acquainted with Bhagavad Gita, Bhagavatam. They must be devotees. That's the perception generally have it.
Okay. Yeah, well, sometimes when you do approach a person who's from an Indian background, they'll say, I know everything. I know Krishna, I know everything. Of course, if we actually know Krishna, then we know everything. But really, Krishna consciousness is a very deep thing. So I know that when I first, around 1978, they asked me to be in charge of preaching to life members in New York in 1978. So I thought, okay, well, I'll do it just like I tried to preach to the Westerners. And it didn't work at all. preach to Westerners, you're not this body, come on. So I tried to preach in that way, and maybe a few might respond, but practically nobody responded. So I could learn that there's a different way you might preach in that circumstance. What I found that it's first they become friendly with them, understand, try to become friendly with them, and then they might listen to you, maybe, or not, but mostly if you become friendly with them, yes, certainly. That's also true from in the Western point of view too, but still the approach sometimes is a little bit different.
If I may, the trouble I personally had is the misconceptions I already had growing up in India. It was not easy to erase those and overcome that. It took me years of questions and answers with my guru and others, and so I personally feel that it's easier for a Western devotee to take up because they come in a clean slate, as per se. But for me, at least, it was a hosh posh already. Did Saraswati Puja, did Lakshmi Puja, did this, did that. Growing up, it was a big hosh posh, and to just kind of erase that and start over was a huge step and a lot of roadblocks.
Yes, thank you for that. Yeah, the conditioning we have in the West is probably different for many of you that are coming from the East, but certainly there's also very strong conditioning both sides. It's just a little bit often different. Thank you for that. I see Kalpesh has hand up. Kalpesh and Sonia Parikh. Yes. Or are we? No? Kalpesh and Sonia Parikh? No? Okay. All right. I don't hear anything.
Prabhu, preaching and book distribution is one of the areas that I am really lacking, and it's very difficult. What the question I had was, if somebody most of my friends are church-going religious people, do you, if they ask me a question and ask me what I believe and what it is I do, then I tell them, but do you talk to them? Do you actively try to preach to them?
Depends on the person.
Yeah.
Depends on, in your relationship with that person. Oftentimes, if they become a little bit friendly with you, then you have an opportunity. I mean, one thing is, the biggest thing for in those situations is prasadam, distributing prasadam, especially. And yeah, then there's different kinds of books that there's in the Christian world, depending on where they're coming from. In the fundamentalist Christians, they have a belief that oftentimes that the theory of evolution is not correct.
Yeah.
So we have actually, the devotee scientists have developed understanding of the fallacies of the evolutionary idea quite deeply, and so they would probably appreciate some of those points, which may be a entry to the preaching. In addition, sometimes when Christian groups come to the temple, they especially like to hear about the concept of God as Bhagavan, the all-attractive person, because they don't have their conception of God is quite often, an old man and powerful, but generally they agree that God is omnipotent, all powerful. But we say, well, part of power is beauty also, not just strength. Beauty is power, wealth is power. So these areas, they tend to be a little more open. At least that's my experience. Maybe others know too, or have. But of course, it depends on the person and what their interests or thoughts are.
Thank you.
Good luck to you. Good luck to you. There used to be, a devotee, Satyaraj. Satyaraj. He used to have pamphlets about Christianity and Krishna consciousness, and I think there's a few books that he printed that way also. That might be interesting for the person, the specifically addressing them. Srila Prabhupada's preaching in Australia was very strongly involved with Christian groups at that time, and that was very instructive how Prabhupada preached to the monks and Archbishop there in Australia. Text 30.
অঞ্জলি অঞ্জলি ভরি ফেলে চতুর্দিশে দরিদ্র কুড়াহা খায় মালাকার হাসে.
The transcendental gardener Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu distributed handful after handful of fruit in all directions. When the poor, hungry people ate the fruit, the gardener smiled with great pleasure.
মালাকার কহে শুনো বৃক্ষ পরিবার মূল শাখা উপশাখা যতেক প্রকার.
Lord Chaitanya thus addressed the multifarious varieties of branches and sub-branches of the tree of devotional service. So Lord Chaitanya is now talking to these branches.
অলৌকিক বৃক্ষ করে সর্বেন্দ্রিয় কর্ম স্থাবর হইয়া ধরে জঙ্গমের ধর্ম.
Since the tree of devotional service is transcendental, every one of its parts can perform the action of all the others. Although a tree is supposed to be immovable, this tree nevertheless moves. Purport. It is our experience in the material world that trees stand in one place, but in the spiritual world, a tree can go from one place to another. Therefore, everything in the spiritual world is called alaukika, uncommon or transcendental. Another feature of such a tree is that it can act universally. In the material world, the roots of a tree go deep within the earth to gather food, but in the spiritual world, the twigs, branches, and leaves of the upper portion of the tree can act as well as the roots. Moving trees. Okay. Moving trees. This devotional service is a moving tree. Next.
এ বৃক্ষের অঙ্গ হয় সব সচেতন বাড়িয়া ব্যাপিল সবে সকল ভুবন.
All the parts of this tree are spiritually cognizant, and thus as they grow up, they spread all over the world.
একলা মালাকার আমি কাহা কাহা যাব একলা বা কত ফল পাড়িয়া বিলাবো.
I am the only gardener. How many places can I go? How many fruits can I pick and distribute? Purport. Here, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu indicates that the distribution of the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra should be performed by combined forces. Although he is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he laments, how can I act alone? How can I alone pick the fruit and distribute it all over the world? This indicates that all classes of devotees should combine to distribute the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra without consideration of the time, place, or situation.
একলা উঠা দিতে হয় পরিশ্রম, কেহ পায় কেহ না পায় রহে মনে ভ্রম.
It would certainly be a very laborious task to pick the fruits and distribute them alone. And still, I suspect that some would receive them and others would not.
অতএব আমি আজ্ঞা দিলুম সবাকারে, যাহা তাহা প্রেম ফল দেহ যারে তারে.
Therefore, I order every man within this universe to accept this Krishna consciousness movement and distribute it everywhere. Purport. In this connection, there is a song sung by Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur. Enechi Oshadhi Maya Nashi Boralagi Harinam Mahamantra Lao Tumi Magi Bhakti Vinod Prabhu Chorane Pariya She Harinam Mantra Loila Magia. You know this, you might know this, recognize this prayer here.
Yeah.
I think. The Sankirtan movement has been introduced by Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu just to dispel the illusion of Maya, by which everyone in this material world thinks himself to be a product of matter and therefore to have many duties pertaining to the body. Actually, the living entity is not his material body, he is spirit soul. He has a spiritual need to be eternally blissful and full of knowledge. But unfortunately, he identifies with the body, sometimes as a human being, sometimes as an animal, sometimes as a tree, sometimes an aquatic, sometimes as a demigod, and so on. Thus, with each change of body, he develops a different type of consciousness with different types of activities, and thus becomes increasingly entangled in material existence, transmigrating perpetually from one body to another. Under the spell of Maya or illusion, he does not consider the past or future, but is simply satisfied with this short lifespan that he has gotten for the present. To eradicate this illusion, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has brought the Sankirtan movement, and he requests everyone to accept and distribute it. A person who is actually a follower of Sri Bhaktivinoda Thakur must immediately accept the request of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu by offering respectful obeisances unto his lotus feet and thus beg from him the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. If one is fortunate enough to beg from the Lord this Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, his life is successful. Let me repeat the verse here. Yeah. Therefore, I order every man within this universe to accept this Krishna consciousness movement and distribute it everywhere. So let's see, we can go up to see what the word for a little bit further. Yeah. Shabakari. Shabakari means to everyone, right? Is that men and women, correct?
Yes.
It's not just the men. So this man here is meaning, the universal human, not the man gender. So that Lord Chaitanya is ordering every one of us to accept this Krishna consciousness movement and distributing it everywhere. That's a powerful instruction, isn't it? Ami agyai, I order. Woo. Very strong order. Then Srila Prabhupada quotes this song we've been singing, this bhajan. Enechi oshadi maya nashi baralagi, harinam mahamantra lao tumi magi. I have brought this Oshadi. Oshadi is medicine, which destroys Maya. This is Lord, the beginning of this is Jeev Jago, Gora Chandra Bole. Lord Chaitanya is saying this, chanting, talking, speaking, singing. So he's saying, I brought this this medicine that destroys Maya. What is that? Harinam Mahamantra. The Harinam, the chanting of the holy names of God. And then this last line there, Lao Tumi Magi. What does that mean?
I ask that you take it.
Magi, yeah, in this one, the previous verse, that Magi not just was asked, but was begging. Isn't it? Is begging. So Lord Chaitanya is begging people, okay, I've come. How long are you going to stay in the witch Maya, in the lap of the witch Maya? Take this, please. I'm begging you. Take it. Take it. Lord Chaitanya
okay,
saying.
all right. Nagi.
And then he says, Bhakti Vinod Prabhu, Chorane Poriya. So Bhakti Vinod is there at falling at the feet of Lord Chaitanya and say Harinam Mantra Loila Magiya. He's begged also for this chanting of the holy names. Wow, very strong. So when we are chanting, following in the footsteps of Lord Chaitanya and Bhaktivinoda Thakur, begging to be able to chant the holy name without offenses and for the pleasure of Srila Prabhupada, your guru, and the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That's a very important direction to go. Srila Prabhupada was also talking in the purport about how in the material world we have this material conception of ourselves as being, somebody has their okay, a material conception of being old or young, fat, thin, from this place or that place. And according to our material conception of ourselves, we make so many plans and we have so many duties. Mostly we're planning how to make adjustments in the material world, thinking that those adjustments that we make will result in happiness, lasting happiness. So we think, I will become a doctor. I will get this house. I will invest in this portfolio. I will become in charge of this or that. We make plans, and this way we think we'll be happy by carrying out those plans for material arrangements. But if we take a step back, we'll see that there's lots of people who have attained those positions that we're, or those situations that we're aspiring for, and are they happy? The verdict of Bhagavad Gita is no, nobody. Bhoktaram jagatapasam sarvaloka maheshwaram suhidam sarvabhutanam gyatvam shantarmishriti. Only a person who knows that Krishna is the enjoyer of all sacrifices, austerities, that penances that we make for any efforts that we're giving, and the Lord of all planets and demigods thereon, and also the best friend of all living entities, that person can become peaceful and happy. So who is that? So we're making many plans for happiness in this material world based on our false conception of the self, but they're doomed to failure. Unfortunately, or fortunately, they're doomed to failure. So what should we do? Well, instead of planning how we were going to arrange things for our physical comforts, we can plan to make plans how we can increase our devotional service and the quality and or quantity of a devotional service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Planning is going to be there, and planning it will be. So if we plan in that way, that kind of planning will purify our hearts and help us to make progress in the spiritual direction. And even if we make plans for spiritual progress, how we'll increase our devotional service, you'd think that Krishna will help. Yes, he will. And also he helps by putting obstacles in our path, internal and external obstacles. Why? You know why? Because that gives us more determination to reach the goal of Krishna consciousness. Bhogaishvarya prasaktanam taya parita chetasam. Somebody who is too attached to material enjoyment, material pleasures, and pursuing them, they don't get the resolute determination for devotional service to the Lord, to reach the goal of pleasing Krishna. A person who's on this path, they're resolute in purpose, and their aim is one. What is their aim? What is their aim?
To attain love of Krishna.
Yes, to please Krishna, yes. Ultimately, to get this fruit of love of God that Lord Chaitanya is talking about. So their aim is one. I used to work sometimes with people who had substance use problems. You know, they were alcoholic or addicted to cocaine or heroin. So sometimes they'd be coming out of jail, and in jail they didn't use their substance, and they'd come out, and I'd ask them, why do you want to remain sober, clean and sober? Usually after getting out of jail for a little bit of time, they would remain free from the drinking or drug using. So I'd ask them that question. And if I didn't get a really good response, if they couldn't answer me quickly, I know that in a week or two, they're gone. Because unless one is really, really determined, one is really determined to stay free from usage of substances, it's gonna come back. So unless one is really determined to free oneself from the material tabernacle, we're going to be remaining in it. So that's why Bhaktivinoda Thakur is Prabhu Chodane Paudiya. He's following, please, please, Lord Chaitanya, let me take shelter of your lotus feet by engaging in your service. Questions, comments?
Thank you, Prabhu. Can I have a comment, question?
Yes, yes, please.
So here you're saying, please, basically a devotee is begging others, right from here.
Yes.
Devotee is begging others, please take to Krishna consciousness. Now, unfortunately, there are some devotee who's very desperate to give, but and especially places like in America, is what way, time, place, what way is the best way we can do, because so many places there are restrictions, and there are places restrictions very limited, and you cannot go to home, because those days, as Lord Chaitanya sent Haridas Thakur and Lord Nityananda, go door to door. And here, going door to door is also Not very much possible. I don't know possible or not, but Jehovah's Witness, they do. They go somehow. I don't know how they manage to go. But generally, it is not very conducive environment. In America, a lot of freedom is there, but at the same time, a lot of restrictions are there. So what do you propose?
Well, I know going door to door is possible some places. Some places the police will come and arrest you. So devotees sometimes get permission ahead of time. But in other places, no permission is required. We used to go, especially, in chanting parties on the streets or in public places like bus terminals or airports. They've restricted that to some extent, but still it's available. So probably not a good idea to get arrested too much. What happens is, it used to be, we would go to places in New Jersey, and the local ordinance would have a restriction that you can't distribute literature or on the street. There'd be a local ordinance. Of course, that ordinance is unconstitutional. But in order to overturn it, you'd have to go to court, pay the lawyer and go to court. So we just generally go to the next town, and some towns wouldn't be as disturbed or have an ordinance in that way. So wherever is favorable, wherever you can do distribution or introduce people to Krishna consciousness, I'll go to that place. There are those who are doing this more frequently than me probably have good suggestions on that. Perhaps there's some comments from others. I see Bhakti Sean is there, and you might like to comment on that point. No, maybe it's busy. Okay.
No, I'm here, Prabhu.
Any comment on this?
On the distribution of.
Well, Krishna Kirtan Prabhu was talking that there's many restrictions. It's difficult to go door to door, maybe for legal reasons and stuff. So any suggestion on that?
Well, I've never actually distributed books door to door, but
okay.
Yeah. So, but I know that, I just try to bring books with me wherever I go, and try to, if I have the courage and I see someone, I just try to distribute it to them. So that's all I can say.
Yes.
Yeah, I learned something the other day with, there's a verse by Prabodhananda Saraswati about how to approach somebody and taking, I don't remember the Sanskrit, but he takes a blade of grass in his mouth and he offers them and he flatters them all kinds of ways. And he said, please forget everything and take to Lord Chaitanya's movement. So flattering him in so many ways. So then Bhakti Shan was showing me that he approaches somebody and they say, "Oh, you work out, don't you?"
Yes, this is how
you work out, don't you? So how to flatter people on the Western side, or maybe this is probably something from a ladies' side. What do you say to the ladies? I don't know.
I usually say, "Oh, I love your energy. Wow, you have you're glowing." And then they say, "Oh, really?" And I can see your aura. And that really
like that. So somehow, yeah. Prabhupada quoted this verse quite a bit. I don't remember the Sanskrit, but he said, we flatter them in all kinds of ways, and then please take this Krishna consciousness. Mother Golokananda Priya, I see your hand up.
She's the book distributor.
Yeah, you were talking about we should not make any distinction to whom we preach. What would you say that, do we need like a Western body to preach to the Western, or Indian body to preach to the Indian? I know Indian doesn't matter, but to especially to the Western people, because I know there was a center where I was staying previously, they said, they were telling, Indian devotees should not be there at the center because people will just get a culture shock just to see Indian.
Yeah, I understand your question. I'm a little concerned with that approach. You know why? Well, Srila Prabhupada came from India, and he influenced quite a few people, even in America. So I don't think that's really the if the message is pure, if the representatives are serious and sincere persons, the message can get through regardless of the bodily coverings. I'm a little I don't agree with that what you're describing there, how they do that sometimes. What do you think?
I don't agree with this too, but yeah, I'm just thinking, I know there was a center there. I was not allowed to go to the center because I have the Indian body. If there was a new preaching center,
so you're disqualified.
To attract Western devotees.
Yeah. I mean, that's understandable that there's certain sections of society that you might have special programs for. But for example, like at the temple, they have a special program for the kids, right? It's called Sunday school. Well, okay, it might be slightly tailored, but it's still the basic Krishna consciousness is there. It's not so. If you wanted to go to the Sunday school, would they let you? Mother Shobharade, is she still there?
Yes, Prabhu. No,
if Mother Golokananda Priya wanted to attend the Sunday school for a time, would that be okay?
Yes, it would be okay.
Oh, okay. So you're not restricted. Yeah. But there might be some particular program that's directed in that same way. But we don't say to restrict people. That's not a good program in my view. Yeah. Open to everybody. Okay. Thank you very much.
What would you say, why we're not successful nowadays to attract the Western devotees, Western people? Why?
Well, we're attracting some. Not as much as we should, yeah, because we're not doing as much preaching as we should. We're not following this order very carefully. Therefore, I order every man within this universe, we're not doing this very enthusiastically or organized way, in an organized way. We can discuss how to do it better, and that would be nice. That's a nice discussion. Although on one hand, you could say, well, Manushyanam sahasreshu kashchid yatati siddhaye yatatam api siddhanam kashchid mam viti tattvata. There's not going to be many buyers. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur said, well, there's so many newspapers in Calcutta, and Calcutta is a small town in one small speck in Bengal, which is one small part of India, which is one small part of the world, which is one small part of the universe, which is only one in many millions of universes. And we can speak on the spiritual world. We can have as many newspapers as there are minutes on spiritual topics, but unfortunately, there are no customers. So there's both sides. We should, as Lord Caitanya is asking us to do a good job in introducing this. And when it says, to accept it, how do you accept it? Well, people accept it sometimes in different ways. Doesn't mean necessarily there'll be a full-time person, but in different ways you accept it. The Krishna consciousness process in your life, chanting the holy names, following four regulative principles, etc. So that should also be considered. Because it's a good discussion to have, though, Mother Golokananda Priya. Maybe if you want to be in that discussion, maybe we can have some discussion like that one day. What do you think?
That would be nice. Yeah, because thank you.
Okay. Hare Krishna. Panchakalpatarubhyascha kripasindhubhya
Titanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namah.
Thank you,
Vaishnavrinda ki jai.
Thank you, Prabhu, for nice class.
Thank you, Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Visnugada. Let them. Let them. Mm-hmm.